Hello and welcome to the Sexient Being Sessions. Today we're talking about the subject of I am enough. I'm Alix Pruett, a certified sex, love, and relationship coach with a BDSM and kink focus. I work with men, women, and couples plus who want to transform their old patterns, pain, and beliefs so they can create thriving relationships that are deeply connected, playful, and fulfilling within themselves and with others. Clanging around on the other end of the line is the
Sorry.
phenomenal Rachelrose. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, hon.
Yes, I'm Rachel Rose, and I am a psychologist and life coach that specializes in trauma and PTSD. I work primarily with women who have gone through domestic violence, narcissistic abuse, or any form of trauma and help them reclaim their independence, peace, and sovereignty.
Beautiful. So I think I'm the one who came up with this topic, so I will
Yeah.
get us going. I know in my own personal journey, this idea of being enough has been a big, big continuing narrative that comes up, whether that's like I'm not enough to like have a loving partner, or there's even sometimes the like I'm too much. We're not going to go as much into those depths right now, but it's this space that feels very imbalanced within me, where it feels like I constantly need to be doing more and more and more, whether that's in my own personal life or in my jobs, in my relationships, whether that's with partners, family, friends, whatever it is. I'm curious what comes up for you around this idea of I am enough.
Well, recently I have actually been my birthday is this weekend and I'm going to be a big whopping 32. And something that came up for me about when I reached 27, 26, 27, basically the age where the women, the biological women of the planet are like optimum, like baby makers. I got the I am not enough as a woman, basically, from society if I'm not married to making babies. And I am 32 now, and I am still, well, technically now I'm divorced, and I'm not making babies. And I am getting a lot of pushback for that. So, like, specifically as a woman, I am enough just by myself, without a husband, without a wife, without kids,
Hmm.
without education, without whatever. Just as a 30, going into my 30s woman, society has conditioned us to have all of this pressure that comes up when we turn 30 if we're not doing certain things that are deemed what women need to be doing at 30. And that's been coming up a lot for me, especially with my birthday coming up.
Yeah.
And I think it's not talked about enough because cis men don't get asked. So when are you getting married? Are you married? Or even the sheer fact when you do get married, we kind of lose our identity. We are the wife
Hmm.
of Mrs. Blah, blah, blah. Our identities are almost, in a sense, stolen from us. And
Yeah,
so,
I'd say that's very on point, especially when you get in any relationship, let alone married, right?
mm-hmm,
Any partnered
mm-hmm,
relationship, like your identity to some degree becomes blended. So you're no longer two
exactly.
individuals. It's like if you show up in an event space or like where you
Mm-hmm.
normally, like, let's say go out to a bar. I don't go out to bars, but a social setting and
Yeah.
your partner is not with you. And now it's like, oh, well, where is
Where are
this
they?
person?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, well, I was an individual before I got with this person, and like they're with
Yeah.
me some of the time, but not all of the time. Maybe they're all with you all of the time, right? But it becomes
Yes.
that like very enmeshed identity in becoming a
Yeah.
couple.
Yeah. And I mean, it stems so much farther than that, especially for like career.
Mhm.
driven women. I have been discussing with my partner, and he completely understands from like a outsider's point of view. He's like, I could never understand because I'm not actually a woman, but
Mhm.
like I feel like I hear you and I agree that that is happening. That half of the jobs that I am applying for right now wouldn't question the same to him as they will for me. And even just as a coach and as a psychologist, I get pushback, lack of a better term, where others won't. So as a woman, I have to stand my ground and assert my authority and listen to people say, "Oh, you went to college? Oh, you
Mhm.
actually have a master's degree? You don't look like someone who's educated." That one's the funniest one. It's like, what is that? That's like, you don't look gay. Like, what? Well, I'm sorry. What's that supposed to look like?
Yeah.
So there's a lot just on I am enough on being a woman that I am just experiencing so much right now of.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say a lot of mine tends to come down to the interplay in relationships. Like, granted, I can recognize
Mhm.
where I've experienced that in my career. It's like, oh, I'm not doing enough. I need to take on more tasks, right?
Mhm.
Um, in a lot of my codependency in relationships, that looked
Yes.
like me taking on more and more responsibility for my partner so they didn't
Mhm.
feel uncomfortable, so they would stay. Because as
Yes.
long as they stayed, that told me I was enough and that I deserved a partner. But if they
Mhm.
got mad, if they like didn't want to be in the relationship anymore, then it would trigger this big wave of a narrative that I
Mhm.
was not enough and I was not worthy or deserving of having somebody else love me, that I was not
Yeah.
worthy or deserving of love,
Yes.
even though that is completely not true. I just was projecting that on it having to come from an outside source in the world.
Mhm. It's yeah, I was just thinking how, I felt that too, but I also didn't feel I was worthy of my own love.
Yeah. Well, and that's for me, it was very much so the same, especially when I started on an actual self love journey and redefining
Mhm.
what love meant and
Mhm.
creating a much different understanding of it for myself. Because, like, for me, like, if I was angry, if I was having a bad day, right? I
Mhm.
wasn't enough. I wasn't lovable. I needed to be more happy. I needed to be more perky. I needed to be more
Mhm.
socially engaging with other people and like
Mhm.
constantly on like high alert for what their needs were while neglecting what mine
My
were.
own, yeah. Yeah, and on top of that, like, certain things have come up for me in what I have dictated to myself self and my brain of what I have to do to become enough
Mhm.
for I'm a person who prefers male partners, so I'm just going to go with a man. Um, so what I believe is enough for a man. And a lot of that is in a sense really superficial, like my body weight. I always tend to just like get in the best shape of my life right after a breakup. We call it my revenge body. And then once I start dating again, I kind of start putting on weight because I'm getting comfortable. And
Mhm.
then at some point, in the majority of my relationships in the past, I have been told, what happened? You used to be so beautiful
Yeah.
because I put on a little weight because I was comfortable. And they're like, let's go out and get cheeseburgers. And while I was doing my revenge body, I was in a healthy, holistic diet, not eating
Mhm.
cheeseburgers regularly. And I've come to the conclusion for myself that that is actually a reflection of the person that I was dating at that time. And I, in a sense, lost myself because my revenge body, that's okay for a time period, but like living a healthy lifestyle is what I really should view it as, instead of
Yeah.
like, oh, about someone else. I just want to live a healthy lifestyle and be consistent with it. And the
Mhm.
person that I was dating was not doing that. And so I adapted that because I believed that if I didn't, I wouldn't be enough for them. But then
Yeah.
in doing that, I once again was not enough for them because cheeseburgers stick to your ass. And there's nothing wrong with eating a cheeseburger, but I ate them way too regularly. Like that
Yeah.
was not a healthy diet.
Yeah, it was
And
outside of
so,
moderation for what
mhm,
you needed to be and
yeah,
feel healthy in yourself.
yes. And that is my like scope that I live in now, is I kind of live in a magnifying glass of like, when I am alone, when I'm single, when I'm thriving for myself in my independence and my solitude, and then I get together with someone else, what changes happen when I tell myself like I am enough, or if I will be enough if I do this or that,
Mhm.
I question myself. Like, will it, one, matter if I go out, drinking with him all the time? Like, is that a lifestyle I want? Regardless if I believe that would make me enough for him, like I'll be enough if I'm always available to him.
Mhm.
That's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
So all of these I am and I will be enoughs are just fairy tales I'm putting in my head.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
I
I
mean,
have to I have to just pay attention and like put a magnifying glass. That's the word I want.
well, that's the
Tell.
thing, like, we're always enough, right?
Yeah, yeah,
No matter
yeah.
like, even if we're in the middle of, like, a huge grieving process and everything
Mhm.
else, like, there is no point in time we are not enough. That's one of my favorite things when people are getting, like, really down on themselves as far as self-love goes or their worthiness has been it was a reflection I had, right? Of being like, "Oh, why do I view myself this way?" And I still come back to it fairly frequently of being like, "Okay, if you walked into, like, a hospital, and specifically the maternity ward, and they had the, like I know they don't set it up this way anymore, but a nursery set up where they had all the babies laid out in a single room and you could view them through a window. Would you look at any single one of those babies and say that they were not enough, that they were not worthy of love, of like being this like miracle to exist on the planet? And usually the person's answer is no. I've gotten like one or two answers where they're like, yeah, babies are ugly. And I'm just like, okay. Yeah, they're funny looking. It's kinda like a pug sometimes, like, so ugly, they're cute, they're all wrinkly and look like old people that are really small. Um,
It's so accurate.
that's I used to love it because my son, when he was a baby, he looked like a wrinkly old man, and then when he would cry, it was hilarious because he looked like an old man throwing a fit. Um, but but in that, like, the premise is, okay, so if every single one of those babies is worthy of love, so are you, right?
Mhm,
It's you aren't like you grow and you change, like your body grows and matures and things like that. But ultimately, like you are still in some form like that baby. That is a miracle. Like that your body functions on its
mhm,
own is a miracle for all those tiny little parts coming together just perfect to create this living organism.
mhm.
So, like,
And
why are you going to hate on that? Your body serves you every fucking day.
mhm. And I do, that excellent point, so accurate. I want to touch on like the shame that we associate with all of the changes that happen throughout our life. When I have let go of my control in order to try and please a man,
Mhm.
and then after it all ended, and I was like, why did I do that? Like I was so stupid. We're constantly going through a like phoenix evolution where we're constantly like in our psyche, in our minds. Our bodies might not be doing it, but that, you know, we are a consciousness inside of a meat suit. So you're like, allow yourself some forgiveness to become a baby again, that wrinkly baby thing. In the tarot, it would be going through the whole tarot and becoming the fool again, but it'd be the
Mhm.
returned fool. And then you keep doing that, and you become the wise fool, the sage fool. You're always a fool because we're always going into something with a semblance of ignorance. So we have to allow ourselves some reprieve, that we're gonna stumble no matter how old we are, 80 years old, all of the experiences we've had, and we're still stumbling through life because there's some there. I don't think that we, you know, that the idea of a vampire is fascinating, because at what point will we know everything, that we can never learn more? Is it infinite? Is it not? Who knows? But allowing yourself a reprieve from the shame you feel of being like, why did I live with that man for 20 years? Why, you know, why did I not do this, that, and whatnot?
Mhm.
Why didn't I believe I was enough until I was 45 years old?
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay that you didn't. You do now. And you're probably going to question your worth again at 46, 56.
Yeah.
And
One
it's
of one of
okay.
my one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite sayings that I also tend to end up telling most people at some point in time. Oh wait, did it just slipped away. Damn it. Love it when that happens. If it comes back up, it'll come back
It's the
up.
worst.
Sorry about
It's
that.
okay.
Uh, yeah, no, it's pretty much it's going through that full cycle again, right? And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, like what I know from my background in the sciences and looking not only at like the macro side of it, so like ever growing larger and larger, also the microscopic and very finite, is every time they find a smaller layer, right? Every time they like decide, oh, the atom is the smallest thing, they are able to break it down into smaller parts,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the same
I
goes
know. Yeah.
up in scale, right? Like, as far as scientists know, like, we have our universe, but then you start incorporating quantum physics and things like that. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, there's other dimensions and other timelines, and all of them like overlap. And so, like, is there some space where there is probably like all the known knowledge in the universe? Yes, right? Up until that point. But then there's always new experiences to
Mm-hmm.
be had. There's new twists and evolutions. So that's where I like that idea of embracing like that energy of the fool, of not
Mm-hmm.
knowing, because then you can get back to, again, the curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
So you can move forward from that point. And then it becomes a sort of adventure and play and exploration.
Yes. And the best and biggest part to pay attention to with the fool is, if you don't go into it with a fool's mind, you won't go into it at all. When we're children, we don't know better, so we don't have that fear. But as
Mhm.
we get older, fears develop. We're like, oh, I actually don't like heights. Like, absolutely not Ferris wheel. Nope, thank you. I'm good.
Yeah.
When we're a kid, we learn those fears. So if you enter into the next cycle of your being, you know, the tarot is a cycle of a year. That's where you know, playing cards come from. That's why there are four suits. There are four seasons. It's a derivative of the tarot, and the tarot is a derivative of ancient Egypt, and their symbolics, the hieroglyphics. Um, so going into the next year with a fool's mindset, still a little bit older, so you're the wise fool now, the returned fool, the sage fool, whatever fool you are, you're still a fool. And having that mindset allows you to stumble a little, because you wouldn't enter the forest of mystery or the world of mystery, the unknown. You wouldn't take that leap into it if you weren't a little bit of a fool.
Mhm.
So going into life knowing that you're just going to be a fool, nothing's wrong with being a fool. One of the fool's like the jester, and the jester is one of the most important people in the court.
Yeah. Yeah, the jester, like, as far as some of the research I'd done on it a few years ago, it was the one person who could actually speak the truths to the king
Yes. And on
and
top of
not be
that
punished
is
for
all,
it.
yes, because it approaches with a fool's mind. And on top of that is one of the most trusted people to the king. One, because of
Mhm.
that truth telling, but also people trust the fool and they will say things in front of the fool, to the fool, with the fool that they normally wouldn't. They open up more. So he knows some secrets of the world that the king understands he knows, which is why he listens.
Mhm.
But the only way a person will really listen is if you tell them it as a story or in a magic show or something like that. Like you have to make them come to the realization themselves and still feel that aha or like whoa magic.
Yeah. That's one of the other things I wanted to point out because you were talking about your revenge body, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I actually noticed the same trend when I get out of partnered relationships, especially when they've been long-term ones,
Mm-hmm.
that like all of a sudden my body will start like morphing and transitioning into something that I actually like genuinely love and feel comfortable and confident in.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And I've found it really fascinating because like for me, yes, there are certain things where like I'm eating healthier. I actually don't eat as many big meals, I've noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm definitely a snacky eater in general. Like I prefer like a bunch of small meals through the day,
Mm-hmm.
but when I'm in relationships, I will do the bigger meals and snacky eating. But the thing I found for it was when I'm not in those relationships, I'm not constantly questioning if I'm enough. I'm just doing the things I enjoy doing without really worrying
Mm-hmm.
what the fuck anyone else thinks.
Yeah.
I'm having dance parties in my house. I'm able like if I like feel emotional, I'm not worried about like the other person getting upset because I'm upset or like getting angry. So I'm not holding parts of myself back because I can tell you for me, in those points in time, like that'll be some of the times where I eat hamburgers and stuff the most. And my body
Mm.
will still go to its healthiest shape and form
Mm-hmm.
and feeling the most energized. And one of the things I ended up realizing is when I get in partnered relationships or living situations where I don't feel like I can be myself. I feel like I have to like take some amount of responsibility for how other people are feeling,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not being that full authentic expression of me,
Mm-hmm.
I start gaining weight. And like this is my story, right? Like there's a part of that that comes down to like
Mm-hmm.
having the like new shared experiences of trying the food that my partner likes and things like that. But I actually found when I go into those relationships, my I am not enough story shows up more. And then my body will start meeting that because I don't feel like I'm enough when I have an extra 20 pounds on my body,
Yes.
right?
I mean, yeah.
And it's really fascinating for me to notice like that those narratives start popping up more and like now I listen to them and I get curious about them where before I'd just like get into that like cycle of like feeling too big and feeling gross and feeling bloated, whatever it was, feeling fat, which I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
clarify. You cannot feel fat. You have fat on your body. Everybody does. If you did not have it on your body, you would actually be dead.
Yeah.
And you can't feel fat. So, what is the actual like sensations that you are feeling when you feel fat? I even had that feeling come up like a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, I feel fat. What am I actually feeling? Right? And
Yeah.
started to
Yeah.
get curious about it.
I read this phenomenological study on women with eating disorders like bulimia or binge
Mhm.
eating, um, and the majority of the time, it had no bio level, like, it was all psychological and what was imprinted on us in the environment,
Mhm.
what we're told, beauty standards, and
Yeah.
on top of it, like, what our parents make us feel. So it all
Mhm.
comes down to stress.
Yeah.
So we stress eat or we stress starve
Mhm.
ourselves,
Yes.
and not like the most common term that was used is I don't feel like I'm enough, and it
Mhm.
creates eating disorders in
Yeah.
women. In men as well, it's just very different because they're the imprint that society has on them is different for
Yeah.
women.
Yeah, and I honestly think more eating disorders and stuff like that do exist for men than are recorded. And same with
Agreed.
even instances of like molestation or rape,
Yep.
because it's
Yep.
either that that it's not reported as frequently and so it doesn't get the statistical backing that women's
Well, it's
experiences do.
yeah, and it's
Um
looked at different because like
yeah.
I have met a number of men who have had that experience when they were children, and they tried to confide in someone during that time, and usually it was their peers, their male
Mhm.
peers of the same age, and the majority of the responses they got were, "Oh my god, you're so lucky. I'd kill
Yeah.
to have sex."
Yeah.
And it was extremely traumatizing for them, man
Mhm.
or male or
Yeah.
female.
Yeah, a large number of the partners I have had, which I think it's supposed to be like 3 out of every, or maybe 1 of out of every 5 women or something
Mhm.
like that has been, like, molested or raped, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
I'm pretty sure that statistic is higher than is
Yes.
actually talked about because that also involves that people had to report it, and a lot of those
Yes.
instances go unreported. The
Mhm,
Not only the
yes.
backing of men getting boasted up when they've had sexual experiences that they didn't actually want,
Mhm.
right, by their peers, but they also don't talk about it as much because it can be seen as this place of weakness, which again
Yeah.
falls into that story of I'm not enough. I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't powerful enough,
Yeah.
right? And then
I
it
wasn't
doesn't get
man
talked
enough.
about. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
100%.
Because honestly, most of my male partners I've had, a lot of the male friends I've had, like for whatever reason, they decide to tell me about this, and I'm like, the numbers of people who are telling me that they've had these sorts of experiences don't line up with statistics.
Yeah. Every single man, maybe sans one or two because I didn't actually have this conversation with them, so I'm going to
Mhm.
exclude them. But every man that I have been with that I have had this conversation with has told me that they have had some sort of child molestation happen to them.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
was either with their babysitter or an adult male in their
Yeah.
situations.
Mhm.
So like that is like eerily high of a statistic. Like that many, it's just not like. And yes, every the women too. Like it's just more commonly accepted and known that it happens to like. I think today it's every 1 in 4 women have
Mhm.
been harassed, molested, or raped in some way in their entire life. But
Yeah.
the sad and it's usually more than once.
Yeah. See, and I would say that statistic is probably even higher than that. I've
Agreed.
heard
Yeah.
as high as 1 in
Agreed.
3, but honestly, like the things I've been like taking into just like I'm going to sit here as a scientist and observe social dynamics, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much where, let's say, just the realm of women, like women will dismiss their own experiences of sexual harassment or
Mm-hmm.
even like being touched by another person without their consent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let alone having other women be like, "Oh, you're fine. Get over it." Right?
Yeah.
And same goes for men in that extent. I actually just recently was at a river event, right? Visiting some friends,
Mm-hmm.
and I had on like little like booty shorts because we're at the river and everybody's in bathing suits and stuff. And one of the women came up behind me and she like pulled up the back of my shorts and then pulled down the bottom of my shorts. And I like turned around and I was like, "Excuse me?" Because she just came up behind me without asking, without saying anything, and decided it was her place or job to adjust my clothing.
Yeah.
And then I went to the extent of being like, I'm gonna pull the bottoms up all the way. You can see all my butt. How you like that?
I know, right? I would
That
just be
was
like, well, I'll
Alix
take it
being
off then.
Cyclops. I'm like, we're at the river. Like, who cares? I
I
would
like, yeah.
personally run around this space naked. I'm only clothed to this amount for other people's comfort.
Yeah, like I'm doing you guys a courtesy here.
Hmm. Yeah. It was
Yeah.
very interesting to it's been a while since I've received like that sort of like body invasion from another female.
Yeah.
But then to have it and like have them be like, "Oh, well, I just did it because like I do that with my daughter." And I'm like,
And
maybe you
yeah,
shouldn't do
and
it
then
with your
there's
daughter.
that list and long ass explanation you get of them justifying their intrusion of you in your space and your body
Yes. Yeah.
or your psyche. All of the
Mhm.
above probably included there.
Yeah.
I went to Target earlier today and I am wearing yoga pants, full on high waisted yoga pants. It basically goes up to like right under my boobs, like yoga pants, full
Mhm.
pants. And then I'm wearing a long sleeve t shirt and it's got a little peekaboo at the bottom so you can see maybe some under boob and that's it.
Yeah.
I'm fully clothed and I am a very curvaceous woman.
You
So
are.
what would be considered like I remember working in Korea, obviously the typical Asian body, and I'm not gonna, Korean, like born and raised in Korea, the typical Asian body is a lot skinnier, less curvaceous than me. Um, I got a booty and I got boobies. And there was a woman, I will not describe her because it really is not important. There was a woman exiting the Target and I just got the biggest like disapproving look up and down. And I'm like, I'm fully clothed. Like, if anything, I'm like showing the least amount of skin. As this woman who was standing next to me was wearing shorts and a t-shirt or a tank top.
Mhm.
You can't see my arms. The only thing that you can see is this tiny little hole where you can see a little bit of underboob. So
Mhm.
I was getting objectified by a woman and shamed because I have a booty. And the same thing happened to me when I was working in Korea. I got sent home one day for wearing a dress. It was fully modest, but I have a booty. And my coworker was really upset by this because obviously I was too, but I took it. But my coworker didn't.
Mhm.
And she told me to wear the exact same dress a couple days later. And I was like, what? Why? And I didn't, but I brought it with me because I didn't really understand what she was doing. She had gone out and bought the exact same dress and wore it to work that day. And she wanted me to wear the same dress. I didn't because I was already dressed and I was just like, I get what you're trying to do here, but I'm not gonna. She didn't get sent home and she wore it again the next day. And she finished the whole week wearing the exact same dress. And then
Mhm.
she went to the principal and complained and was just like, how is it okay? Like, we're literally wearing the same thing. You're literally objectifying her body, and that's not okay. She's
Yeah.
doing her job. She's good at her job. Let her do her job. You deprived the children that day of a amazing teacher because you objectified her.
Mhm.
And the same thing happens to teenagers. Like, there's so much going on in like movies and TV shows because it's really happening in high schools.
Mhm.
Literally, I remember getting sent home in high school, and I obviously fought back because I'm a fighter, and my mom would come with me. And I'd be like, you're depriving me of my education because boys can't control themselves. or the teachers.
Yeah.
And I learned from that my body was not good enough to be accepted by the world, or it was too good.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah, and
there is
it's
there
that imbalance of the too much, not enough that
exactly.
can show
Well,
up.
there yeah, because like I've struggled with the feeling of I'm too pretty, or I'm too curvaceous, or I'm too this. My skin is too perfect. My grades are too perfect. You know, like I have too good of a resume
Mhm.
for a woman.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, like growing up, you know, my mom and dad used to tell me the reason that guys objectify and hit on me is because I'm just so beautiful. And I've mentioned this before, like this actually created a lot of trauma for me.
Mhm.
I love that I'm beautiful. I really do. And I'm not ever going to tell anyone that they're ugly. Everyone is beautiful. I'm not trying to say I'm
Mhm.
the most beautiful person on the planet. There are plenty of women that I'd be like, oh my God, you're a goddess. Um, but being told that I am being abused, harassed, or objectified because I'm pretty is
Mhm.
not something to soothe.
No.
And it amplified that I am not enough in any direction that I go. I'm either too ugly or I'm too pretty, but I'm never in between.
Hey, Rachel Rose,
Yes.
you're a fucking goddess.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, and it is really easy to see. And there's actually been a lot more focus socially
Mm-hmm.
on the I am not enough narrative when it comes to body image
Mm-hmm.
and physical form. Like you can see, I think it's like Hanes or something like that, or Dove, like they all have like plus size models and like average women's bodies and everything like that now, and are
Yes.
starting to incorporate that more and more, which I definitely
Yes. Which is
appreciate
great.
because the beauty standard has changed so
Mm-hmm.
much over the course of human evolution, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
all that long ago, maybe 150 years, where being very curvaceous was the beauty standard because it meant you had enough money to eat.
Yeah.
And if you
And
were stick thin and scrawny, it meant you were poor.
yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's laughable too. Less than 100 years ago, Marilyn Monroe, and what is that? 60 years ago at best, right now,
Mhm.
was considered the most beautiful woman alive. She had cellulite. She had big tatas and a big booty.
Mhm.
She had bleached hair. She wasn't even natural. She was a brunette.
Yeah.
Like she had work done, all of this and that, when she was considered the most beautiful woman. Like, and then because of that, like I said, it goes both ways for body standards. Like you can either like what was considered beautiful in the early 2000s was basically that like stereotypical like skinny Victoria's Secret model body where you had like no fat on your body whatsoever.
Mhm.
And what was considered a curvaceous woman or a plus size woman was basically someone who was maybe 15 pounds heavier than that.
Mhm.
And that is now considered unattractive today in 2023. But there are women who genetically are skinny like that. And so there's now the opposite. You know, they feel unattractive because they're not curvaceous.
Well, one of the interesting things I've gotten to notice because I know part of my personal narrative around being too big in my
Mm-hmm.
physical body comes from like my mom was super petite, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very small in height, but also in her physical build. And I got to hear her talking about her cottage cheese thighs growing up. And so I was like, if she's too big, then what am I? Right.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
I was raised in Southern California till I was 11. So down there, it was very like late 80s, early 90s, like imprint for what was aesthetically beautiful, which was the
Mm-hmm.
like heroin chic as far as
Yeah.
modeling, but a lot of my friends inadvertently ended up being very petite in size and stature as well. And the thing I
Mm-hmm.
found really fascinating and like even still get to observe when I have friends who are like a double zero in size, which is tiny through the hips,
That's
right?
the size of my leg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? But in that, it's I've watched them where they're like concerned about being too thin, but
Yeah.
then as soon as they gain some weight, it's, oh, I weigh too much now. And so
Mm-hmm.
it is a huge thing with body dysmorphia and not seeing themselves as they actually are
Yep.
that comes into play with that. And then again, it's that imbalance of I'm not enough, now I'm too much. I'm not enough, now I'm too much. But not coming to like that center point that is just loving and accepting of your body because it's doing a fucking badass job for you.
Yeah. Yeah, something that I've been saying to myself recently because I've finally come to a place in the world and myself where I am enough for me, but that
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily mean I will be enough for everyone else out there.
Yeah.
So,
Nope. Are you there? Rachel Rose. Well, I think we lost her briefly. I'm not sure. So her mic is muted, so we'll wait till she jumps back on. But like this whole premise we've been talking about is really like your body, your being, your emotions, like they are always enough. And your body, even through the loss of weight, through the gaining of weight, it can be giving you different messages, and it's figuring out what's going on underneath for the need in your system for what's really important versus it meaning that you have to be a certain shape or way. Um, I think one of the things I want to start touching on is that this doesn't just show up with our
hello?
bodies. Hi, you're back.
There we go. I am so sorry. I got a phone call and then I got disconnected. I'm going to figure out why I couldn't hear anybody or people hearing me. I'm so sorry.
So, did you have anything else you wanted to wrap up on just on that I am not enough story falling into body image? I kind of wanted to shift it to experience and emotions for a little bit of the call.
Sorry, I couldn't. You cut out.
Oh, sorry about that. Did you have anything else you wanted to say on body image or the way that I am
Well,
not enough stories show up there?
well, the only thing that I've got interrupted, rudely interrupted by the person who called me. Um, how dare they want my like advice or whatever it is? How dare they want me in their lives? Um, was I have gotten into the habit of telling people it's okay. Like I'll tell like I know that I'm enough for me, and it's okay that I may not be enough for other people.
Hmm.
And I've been telling people that, and it gets commonly construed, I guess. People don't misunderstood by the people that I'm saying it to, because because literally I'll say to them, "It's okay that I'm not enough for you," and then they're like, "Oh no, I'm not saying you're not enough," and I was like, "I know you're not. I know I'm enough, but I'm not for you, and that's okay because I know I am for me."
Hmm.
And so you can either see me for my worth, or you can skip along. And that was the point that I was trying to make.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's beautiful. And that's like, I mean, even just that statement, it like pulls it away from directly being body image, which is where, like I said, I wanted to talk on it
You wanted
around
a detour, yeah.
experience and our emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because those are what we experience and how we interpret that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have definitely had a lot of instances through my life where I would share whatever my experience was,
Mhm.
and I would get told on some level that I was wrong,
Yes.
right? I actually just had an
Oh,
instance
goodness, yes.
where this was really glaring, where I had somebody ask me about my relationship with my current partner and was like, well, is he your intellectual equal? And I looked at them and I was just like, yes. And they then looked at me, just dead faced, and were like, I asked you that because they're not. And I was just like, okay,
My
that's
God.
that's real interesting to receive right now. And then they went on this whole tirade around why they do not believe he's my intellectual equal. They did not actually ask about any of my experiences for my partner being my intellectual equal and why that is my experience of him.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
I'm
so
curious. Sorry.
there can be those instances though that where like you're like, no,
Mhm.
this is my experience of a thing, and somebody just literally like detours in and they're like, no, this isn't good enough for you. It's not enough for you, or it's too much for you,
Mhm.
whatever it is, where I'm like centered in my body and I'm like, no, I'm great with this.
Also, it's like I love how people impose their opinions on you. I'm
Hmm.
curious, did you ask this person, "Do you feel like you are my intellectual equal?"
I did not. Because I'm
Because
going to
it's
be honest, I don't feel like that person is actually my intellectual equal.
oh, that's my point exactly.
Yeah.
If they say, "Yes, I do," I would
Hmm.
respond with, "I don't.
Yeah.
So why should I listen to what you're saying to me right now?"
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting situation. It was also a beautiful space for me to get to see where that I am enough story or I am not enough story has popped up in the past, where normally
Mhm.
before, like, I would have just let them say their bit and then walked away questioning myself. And I still had the questioning of myself, being like, is their reality more accurate or is mine more accurate? And
Mm.
it pretty much came down to like, okay, they've had these very minimal experiences with this person. This was the impression they got from their experience and their filters, and that's okay.
Yes.
That is also not my lived experience with this person who's in my life daily.
Mhm.
And that is also okay. And for
Mhm.
me, like the I think the difference that I could weed out from everything they were saying is they're like, you should be with a doctor. Like, that's how smart the person you're with needs to be. Right.
Need.
And I was like, okay, well, like, there's plenty of doctors in the world who I wouldn't actually consider my intellectual equal either,
Yeah.
because they're stuck in certain belief systems
Yes.
about the way the world operates. And for me, my partner is willing to admit when he doesn't know something or isn't familiar with something, and then he gets curious about it. That to
Mhm.
me is my intellectual equal, because then it gives the space for information and knowledge sharing
Yes.
and creating connection and conversation versus just like, it's my way or the highway.
Mm. Having a form of being humble
Hmm.
is a criteria to be an intellectual equal to anybody.
Yeah.
I just I find it this happens to me a lot too. It's okay to ask if someone is your intellectual equal. That's
Hmm.
important to have in a relationship. And just leave it there. Just ask, do you believe this person is your intellectual equal? And if your answer is yes, that person should just be supportive.
Well,
I don't
and
like shoulds, but
even
you
if
get my point.
they don't agree, like, even if
Mhm.
they don't like believe this person is your intellectual equal,
Mhm.
like, try to take the stance of curiosity. Like, let's say I met Rachel Rose's partner one time and I was like, this guy's not good enough for her. And I dwindle it down to like, I don't think he's smart enough for her.
Mhm.
Right. And I ask you, like, do you think this person's your intellectual equal? And you tell me yes. Like, just me being me, I'm gonna go, cool. Like, what about your experience with him tells you that? Like, what have you gotten to see of this person that I haven't gotten to see or experience myself?
Yeah.
Because
I,
there are depths that come out with different people.
and that not
So,
only is a great question to ask, it also helps the party that you're asking confirm that to themselves.
mhm,
Like you could say, yes, I believe they are, and then that's a conscious response. And then they ask you that, and unconscious stuff arises, and you're like, wait, are they? And then if you're, hopefully you come to the conclusion, yeah, of course they are. But it's good to evaluate constantly because people are
yeah,
constantly evolving.
mhm,
What could be deemed as, in the past, I've dated someone who was my intellectual equal at the time.
mhm,
And then I furthered my education, and they no longer are. And that inevitably ended the relationship because I saw that they weren't growing with me.
mhm,
And so my family constantly asks me, are they? Because they see my evolution. And they're not asking me because they don't believe that person is. They don't, they care, but they really just want to make sure that I'm happy and I see the big picture.
yeah.
And I'm constantly thinking about that.
Well, I think one of the other, like, really valid points that comes up in this is, let's say my partner was not my intellectual equal, and I recognize that. If it is not a need for me to have my partner
Mm-hmm.
be my intellectual equal, like, and we'll stick with, like, on a book smarts level,
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. It's not
Yeah.
something I need.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I personally, like, even in this, like, exploration for myself afterwards, I was like, okay, like, even if this person, like, doesn't have as much, like, formal education as I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they have immense curiosity to learn is highly valuable to me. But he also happens to be one of the most emotionally intelligent people I have ever
That's so
met.
big. Yeah.
And especially from a male. And I'm like, even if he was not my intellectual equal in other ways, I would be very satisfied with the level of emotional intelligence, because for me,
Mm-hmm.
maturity doesn't necessarily come from book smarts.
Mm-hmm.
Maturity comes from deeper levels of emotional attunement anymore.
Yeah. And something that's coming up for me in my brain is I have a master's degree in psychology. The person that I am seeing does not.
Hmm.
He has his own education. Um, but technically, if we want to be real technical with this, he is not my intellectual equal because my intellectual equal is someone who has the exact same intellect as I do in
Hmm.
psychology. And I don't want to be with someone who has the exact same intellectual capacity as me. I want someone who challenges me, who brings up stuff. And honestly, I don't really want to date someone who's constantly contesting my theories in psychology because that's what psychology is, theory.
Yeah. Well, most sciences, it's okay.
Yeah. Yes, you are correct on that.
Speaking as a scientist, for my primary educational background, I'm gonna tell
Mm-hmm.
everybody most of it is theories.
Yeah. And it's constantly evolving. It's what we know so far, which
Hmm.
is why people who are like, well, 20 years ago, like they said this was it, the right thing to do, and now they did a bunch of studies and they're like, actually, this is bad for you. We once
Hmm.
believed that smoking was good for us,
Yeah.
and now we know it causes cancer.
Yeah.
And that is not to say that back in the day when we believed that it was good for us, that was what we knew so far.
Hmm.
And we could take that, and I love this, into ourselves. This is the returned fool, the evolved fool. This is what we know so far. We're going to learn more about ourselves, about the people in our lives, who we want to keep in our lives, and that will constantly be evolving.
Well, even just with the example of smoking, like
Mhm.
there is probably some balance,
Mhm.
right? Balance of being able to smoke tobacco and not having it be just toxic in your system. But
Mhm.
again, like that's going to be a little bit different for every single person. And it's
Mhm.
probably significantly less than like the average smoker uses it because the way most people use nicotine is a form of self medication
Yes.
rather than processing through the deeper feelings and everything that are there. I've
Yeah.
been a smoker since I was 14 and I've done a lot of my own exploration around that. Honestly, when I went to this event where these things happened that I've talked about, the woman pulling down my shorts and even this like is your partner your intellectual equal, it was very interesting because I haven't smoked since beginning of May and before that and that was like a specific event where I'm like, I'm gonna let myself smoke at this thing.
Mhm.
Um, and before that, it was around New Year's. Like I inadvertently quit around New Year's, not meaning to. But as I was driving to this place, I got this really strong, like visceral urge in my body to go buy a pack of cloves. And I was like, this is interesting. Like I haven't wanted to smoke. And then like something deeper went like, no, please go pick them up. And so I went and picked some up. I smoked that day. And it was fascinating because when that instance happened towards the end of me being there, I was like, oh, this is why my system wanted to smoke. It was that
Mhm.
like high level of judgment from other people who just have more of that view of like, it's their way or the highway.
Mhm.
And I was like, I got to ask myself, like, how much do I really want to put myself in those situations?
Mhm. Well,
Because I don't have to expose myself to that
yeah,
sort of toxic dynamic.
you do not. And like tobacco, like historically has been a part of the healing path
Hmm.
in a lot of tribes, like Egyptian, Native American, um, Celtic. Like
Hmm.
it's a big part of like the spiritual journey.
Yeah.
But it is not done, like in Native American culture, it's the peace pipe. In Celtic, why do I keep forgetting that word? Celtic culture, it is in, burning just like incense would be for a lot of Asian cultures. Um, and so like you said, like there is a time and place, and it's usually a lot less frequent than, smoking a cigarette every time you get stressed out.
Hmm. Yeah, versus the daily habit, which is where it becomes this constant buildup of toxins in your system,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's, like I said, I can tell that that very deep visceral urge in my body to want to smoke
Mm-hmm.
was there as a protective mechanism for a space where I don't feel I can fully be myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I can, because for me, the thing I've noticed is when I smoke cigarettes, it tends to allow me to dissociate and just be in my head versus feeling the uncomfortable feelings in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And especially that like tightness and restriction in my lungs, or when I am feeling that, it is then on some level blamed on, oh, I'm smoking. Of course, I feel this like discomfort or this pain
Yeah.
in that space around my heart and my lungs because I'm inducing smoke into my body, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I've also
I
had plenty of experiences where it doesn't do that. So it's interesting. The body is wise.
yes. And the so is the mind, and we use
Hmm.
a lot of, like, I used to use alcohol when I was going through cancer, and I didn't know at the time that I also had synesthesia.
Hmm.
And so basically, the world around me was spinning all the time, and it made me feel like a lack of control. So I would drink to have a placement for it. I'd be like, "Oh, the world is spinning because I'm drunk." And I started smoking too. So the reason the world is spinning is because I have a nicotine high. And I never dealt with it because a lot of that is psychosomatics. I was going through something very traumatic. You know, not only was my body deficient of certain vitamins that I wasn't getting because I had cancer, but also I wasn't dealing with the psychological effects of having cancer. I was covering it up. So it's a coping mechanism. And it served me at that time. Like that, I have no regrets for my level of drinking or smoking during that time. It served me. Does it serve me now? No, I don't need to do that. What would serve me better now is completely different than it was 10 years ago when I had cancer. And so it is in moderation, understanding the circumstance of the situation and not believing that it's going to be a forever thing. In my case.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the point. And like with nicotine, it can be so easy to get stuck in that cycle because it's not talked about how it is a type of coping mechanism as much, or it's just like, oh, it's just stress. But then people don't take the time to look at what's underneath it and in deeper layers. And I do need to get going. Um, is there anything else you want to say on the topic before we head out?
I do not. I also have to get going, so
Okay.
perfect timing.
Yes, beautiful. If you are interested in working with Rachelrose or myself, you can find our contact information under our profiles or under the About page on YouTube. It has been beautiful talking with you, as always, Rachelrose.
Yes, likewise.
And next week, oh, I'm excited. We're going to talk about shadow dancing. And this to me is that space of like being in your like wild abandon and playfulness while playing with your shadow.
Beautiful. I love it. I'm so excited.
Yes, so am I. All right, until next time, everyone.
Yes, have a good afternoon, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.